Hello, this is John with Theology Ed. This is part 16 of the iPet Goat 2 Explained series. In this part, we are going to be looking at, we're going to be doing a lot. It's going to be really interesting. We're going to put together some of the most important pieces of this puzzle, I think. Really, what we're going to be doing is trying to figure out what the spell is that she cast. She cast a spell, and her prop is this apple, and she lets the apple roll out of her magic circle, and this apple rolls over and hits Obama's foot. He's terrified, right? And that he had seen the apple open up into a lotus flower, bring forth a lotus flower after it opened up. And we see at the end of the video when Ra-Hoor-Khuit finally exits into the sunlight, the lotus flowers all around him are opening up, suggesting that this is ultimately what she was trying to accomplish. Her magic was to bring forth this Aeon of Horus in completion and in fullness. But if you look closely, right here we have a big apple. This is the scene where Kali is dancing here, a dance of destruction. And to give us a glimpse down at the bottom, right up, what had rolled up and hit it is a larger version of the apple here. And remember, we go from microcosm to macrocosm with the magic. This is watching it unfold. What it's doing, what we're seeing here is what we see in a small version there, we're going to see in a large version here. And this is going to explain everything that's going on here, is going to explain that this is what she was trying to accomplish here, that will eventually lead to this dance of destruction, Kali's dance of destruction. Kali, you remember Kali? We'll look at her more closely in this video. Her dance of destruction and the destruction that is caused by it is related to climatic events in the bring about of the Aeon of Horus at the end. So this is where it's going, and that's what we're going to look at right now. In order to do that, we're going to go through the scene that is right here. Okay, to that point. Now, we're going to have to try to explain all of that. We're going to look at Kali. We're going to look at the structure in which Ra-Hoor-Khuit is traveling in his boat of Anubis. We are going to look at Madame Q, or who the creators of iPet Goat 2 call Madame Q, the woman in the lighthouse. We're going to look at the lighthouse. We're going to look at the sky around the lighthouse. We're going to go through all of that. And it's going to come together really incredibly as a whole, and that's why we're going to look at them as a unit. So there is Madame Q. Here is sort of the main scene, I think, to understanding all of it. It's in the middle of that sequence we just saw, and it's going to help us to understand everything. So let's take a look at Madame Q. She's called Madame Q by the creators of iPet Goat 2 in the Hierophant gallery on the website. Madame Q's point of suffering is sex. Is it repression or indulgence? We don't know. Yet there is definitely shame there. Now, of course, we have the letter Q, and she's called Madame Q, and throughout the video we have various Qs. People have pointed out that on the front of the shed we have the symbol that we've talked about, the black sun, and the crescent moon with the black sun and with the sun. Okay, we've looked at a number of these things in our videos. However, they point out if you flip it over, it's a Q. And that's interesting. Some people have also pointed out that it's a C-O-V. I think this is a D, and they find an I in there somewhere. So it looks like COVID is written in here, which is possible, I suppose. But I don't remember who all found those, and it's not my primary point right here to mention it. But you should look into that. That's really interesting set of observations. But they point out the Q, and then we also have, of course, the woman, the teacher, with I-M-Q, which looks like I'm Q, which Charles Curtis, in a video of his, pointed out that he thinks that's saying that with QAnon, for example, that the Pet Goat creators are saying they are behind QAnon. I'm Q. This isn't opposition, it's controlled. But, and that's an interesting observation. But I'm not too interested in QAnon when looking at this scene or with these Qs at this point. We're going to look at her and try to understand a little better what she is. And I think what's actually going on here is the Q is related to her, this sexuality, this element to her that's where they point out that her point of suffering is sex. She's clearly portrayed in a sexualized manner. She's nude. She's got all these marks on the wall indicating all her partners. She's old and like a worn out whore, the way she's being depicted. And old, used up, basically. And so she has this point of suffering. And notice they use the word point. Madame Q's point of suffering is sex. Why? Why talk like that? The letter Q actually has a history that goes back to, by way of Latin, the Greek letter kopa. The kopa looks like that. You can sort of see the resemblance to the Q. It's a circle with a point straight down, almost like the symbol of Venus. The letter Q means piercing the veil. It follows the letter pi in Greek. Pi is the letter in Greek that makes the sound like the letter P. Similarly, the Q, which came from the kopa, follows the letter P in the English alphabet. And so the Q letter, the letter kopa, is transliterated into Latin as the letter Q, and then we get a Q as well. The veil that the kopa pierces may pertain to fabric, a veil of ignorance, a veil of separateness, a veil of land, the veil of the sky, the veil of night, or the veil of virginity, the hymen. Okay, so we have a understanding of this Q as a point-like letter that pierces the veil sexually. And when we look back at our character, of course, she is in this position being pierced, if I can speak that way, by the light. This light that comes from the hand and that hurricane-looking swirl, the spiral in the sky outside the lighthouse. And so she's being pierced, and this is going to be a different kind of piercing than your normal partners would do. This is unique. This is something that is going to be important to this bring in the Aeon of Horus. And I suspect that's what the Q is related to. And that's why it says, we don't know, is it repression or indulgence? We don't know. Yet there is definitely shame there. Often shame accompanies, whether justifiably or not, being a victim of rape, or when you're defiled or violated, these sorts of things. And Madame Q's point of suffering is sex, and they act like, well, we don't know why it would be that way, but there's definitely shame there. And so I suspect what they're looking at is some sort of violation and defilement, if you can call it that, using the older way of their language, and language they use, actually. And I'll use that, and I'll show that in a minute. But so that is, I think, what's going on here. And we'll see why she's going to be violated in this way in just a few minutes. All right. So in order to really understand what's going on, we should skip ahead, take a look at this card again. This is the Aeon card. This is Aleister Crowley's explanation of the card. He created the card. The card is in the Thoth Tarot deck, and it replaced a prior tarot card called the Judgment, or the Last Judgment, or the Angel. Here's what how Crowley explains that, how he justifies the transition from the old card to a new card. Because it's pretty bold to go into an old tarot deck and say, we're just going to throw that other card out and put in my card. And that's what he did. In this card, it has been necessary to depart completely from the tradition of the tarot cards, in order to carry on that tradition. The old card was called the Angel, or the Last Judgment. It represented an angel or messenger blowing a trumpet, attached to which was a flag, bearing the symbol of the Aeon of Osiris. Below him, the graves were opening, the dead rising up. There were 3 of them. The central one had his hands raised with right angles at the elbows and shoulders, so as to form the letter Shin, which refers to fire. The card, therefore, represented the destruction of the world by fire. Take a look at the card. It's right here. I have 2 versions of it up here. You have the angel, the trumpet. Here's the flag that he calls the flag bearing the symbol of Osiris. Of course, the symbol of Osiris is going to be a symbol of death, resurrection, and sacrifice. And of course, that's what a cross would represent in this context, represent the symbol of Osiris. Here he has the 3 people being resurrected, coming out of their graves, and the middle one with the hands in the position like the letter Shin, the Hebrew letter Shin. Here's what the Hebrew letter Shin looks like. This card actually shows it to us, which is convenient, but they're both the same card, 20. Card 20, Judgment, Judgment, Angel, Angel. Obvious similarities. Okay, and the Shin would represent fire, and the letter sort of looks like fire. If you look at it, it looks like three flames rising up. The Aeon of Horus card here replaced it. Notice it also has the Shin right there. And so we're going to look at what that card represents because it's going to help us to understand the scene with Madame Q. So Crowley continues, not there, here. Crowley continues. Around the top of the card is the body of Nuit. This is Nuit. That is the primary deity of Thelema. That's their main goddess. Now look, she has hands here, feet here, a head here, breasts there, and the breasts have galaxies for nipples and stars. She's covered in stars. Okay, she is the star goddess. In ancient Egypt, they depicted her like this as well, naked and like over everybody in the sky. Okay, there she is. That is your sky or star goddess. Okay, so she's the star goddess who is the category of unlimited possibility. As unlimited possibility, she's considered matter as opposed to that which makes matter into things. Because matter, of course, if you had a lump of bronze, you can make all sorts of things with matter. That piece of bronze, you can make statues, you can make doorknobs, you can make lots of things. Doesn't matter. Anything you can make of metal, just about, you can make of that bronze because matter can be formed in different ways. It's a possibility, unlimited possibility. And so Nuit is the category of unlimited possibility. Her mate is Hadit. That's the other god. That's the male counterpart to Nuit. Her mate. The ubiquitous point of view. That word point is important. Hadit is almost always associated with being a point, including the point in the mark of the beast, or right there, there's the point in that disc that has the wings. Okay, that's why there's a point in there. He's going to be represented by that, as Crowley is going to explain. The ubiquitous point of view, the only philosophically tenable conception of reality. He is represented by a globe of fire, there's our globe of fire, representing eternal energy, winged to show his power of going. Power of going, there's the wings. The reason it's called, he gets the name with their, or description, of having the power of going as opposed to being unlimited possibilities. He's the one that forms or actualizes the matter and makes things of it. And so he's the male active principle that's going to go on this passive thing and turn it into something. He's the thing that's going to go. And of course, this is going to be a phallic symbol, okay, masculine symbol. Here's a yoni, and you're going to bring them together here. This is a sexual act being depicted on the tarot card. A union that is going to actually generate who? The Aeon of Horus, or Heru-ra-ha, the composite deity, Ra-Hor-Khuit, and Harpocrates with his finger to his lips like normal. And so continuing to read, as a result of the marriage union of these two, of Nuit and Hadit, the child Horus is born. He is, however, known under his special name, Heru-ra-ha, a double god. His extroverted, or active, form is Ra-Hor-Khuit, and his passive, or introverted form is Harpocrates, or Harpocrates, as we know it using the Greek form name. He is also solar in character, Horus is, and is therefore shown coming forth in golden light. That's why you have this yellow golden light around him. Okay? So that is the symbolism of the card. And what's important here for what we're going to look at is we have Nuit as the sky god and Hadit as the masculine principle that's going to come, her mate, and bring forth the Aeon of Horus through a cosmic sexual act. Now, take a look. Let's read a little more here. We're going to take a look at this. This comes from Aleister Crowley, a biography, spiritual revolutionary, and so on. That's the name of the book. The universe is the manifestation of a perpetual orgasm, the embrace of opposites, where Nuit is matter, we just talked about that, and Hadit, motion, the going, the thing that's going to make it into stuff. A big bang indeed. The doctrine expresses philosophically what Einstein in 1905 through 1907 expressed mathematically in his famous formula: energy equals mass, matter in parentheses, multiplied by light speed motion squared. Multiplication is generation. A year before Einstein published his masterwork, Crowley's mind was already imbued with relativity concepts. Crowley wished to reunite science and religion. Rituals celebrating cosmic realities would be the sacraments of the revolutionary new Aeon. So these rituals are going to celebrate cosmic realities, the cosmic reality of the union of Hadit and Nuit, which is a what? It's perpetual orgasm. It's a sexual ritual. The confirmation that Crowley had a powerful cosmosexual ritual in mind lies in his rough notebook telling the rituals, ordeals, and rites of the secret public worship of RHK, Hadit, and Nuit. They're your three deities. They're their primary deities, Nuit being the most important, Hadit second, and Ra-ha third. And so when they are invoked in the Mark of the Beast ritual, at the very beginning of the ritual, it begins with an invocation of Nuit, then Hadit, thirdly, Ra-ha in that order. Now, continues. But for private work, the beast is Hadit, the scarlet woman, Nuit, and she is above him, ever. Let him never assume power. Let him never look to her. Amen. For this she wears the blue and gold abai of Nu and the indigo nemes. If I mispronounce anything, sorry. He wears the scarlet and gold abai and the green nemes. They work mostly in Egyptian, which they will be taught to pronounce. He wears the winged globe, that's Hadit, of course. For open work, he can wear the Abramelin things. Let's see. Now, let's talk about this ritual a little bit, this supreme ritual. The officers in the supreme ritual are enjoined to seek Nuit and Hadit by means of, not that they're identical with, but through the means of Babylon and the beast, concealed. Sometimes they spoke in concealed ways to hide from the profane who they're really referring to, instead of referring, when they have Babylon and the beast referring to Nuit and Hadit. So often in the writings of the Thelemites, they would refer to them as Isis and Osiris because it's like mother and father of Horus. But really, in their theology, it's Hadit and Nuit as depicted in that tarot card, right? Okay, so let's continue. To add further confusion, the officers, O and I, are given each other's lines and the names Nuit and Hadit are removed. So you see how they work through this. But the point is, when you hear Babylon and the Beast, you're talking about Nuit and Hadit. The Scarlet Woman Nuit, the Beast Hadit. And it's a cosmosexual ritual played out in the heavens, but then carried out ritually through Babylon and the Beast here on Earth in order to bring about this new Aeon of Horus. Now, interestingly, bring this about can be done in a way that outrages nature. Okay, here's an explanation of this a little bit. The twins, Set and Isis, is that really who it is? I'm not sure, because it goes on to say the harlot and the beast, which we just talked about being who? Hadit and Nuit, are busy with that sodomitic and incestuous lust, which is the traditional formula for producing demigods, as in the cases of Mary and the dove, Leda and the swan, etc. The card is 11, the number of magic, AVD, Aleph, the fool, impregnating the woman according to the word of Yod, the angel of the Lord. His sister had seduced her brother beast, shaming the son with her sin. She has mastered the lion and enchanted the serpent. Nature is outraged by magic. Man is bestialized and woman defiled. The conjunction of a bestialized man and a defiled woman, the conjunction produces a monster. It affirms regression of types. Instead of a man-god conceived by the Spirit of God, by a virgin, by a virgin in innocence, we are asked to adore the bastard of a whore and a brute, begotten in shamefullest sin and born in most blasphemous bliss. Okay, so you see that this bringing about the Aeon of Horus, to bring about this new child, is going to be represented how? It appears to me through a outrage of nature in the beast defiling the whore. So in the shamefullest way of sin and born in the most blasphemous bliss. That's what we're looking at in the Bring This About. We're going to be looking here at this scene, and we're going to get the various levels of this act, of this ritual with the act itself. So in the heavens, we have a hand coming down. That, of course, is going to be Nuit's hand. She is the goddess of the heavens up here. Then we have over here a male principle in the heavens with the semen and the phallic symbol here. So we have ejaculate coming down, and we are seeing the cosmosexual act in heaven, this perpetual orgasm, if you want to call it that, going on up here. But to bring about this new Aeon of Horus, it's going to have to be done through a ritual between the beast and the whore. Down here, the beast in Babylon. And what we're going to see is this being instantiated here. So we have the beast, and inside the lighthouse, the whore. Now, when we go and move in, of course, this is, we'll talk about this again, but this is the moon card, almost exactly, really creatively depicted. You could take a picture of it and put it on a tarot card and call it the moon card, and people would understand. It's that clear. But let's go ahead and keep going. And just to show that this is not just these two, Nuit and Hadit, and this instantiation of Nuit and Hadit in the this whore of Babylon with the beast. But when we go in and see the whore, when she's finally being defiled, notice the light coming from without here. That light is going to come in, and when we watched in the video, we saw the light goes around the window, and when it finally gets to that window, like the storm is turning around and pointing at her, when that happens, the whore becomes terrified, moves in. She's already shocked or surprised to see the semen falling, the rocks falling, but when she sees the light come in, she goes into a panic, full panic, and backs up, and she lands over here, and the light comes in at her. This is not, I don't believe, the light going out from her. If it is, then there's probably an explanation for that too. But I believe it's trying to depict the light coming at her in her defilement. But notice the light is right at the vagina, and when the scene ends, it fades, and then you come in here, we get to see this opening as the bright light in the building, and it looks like this is the direction that the Ra-Hoor-Khuit character is going, to the exit. In other words, this is depicting her from a different perspective. This is depicting the whore of Babylon, this church. Excuse me, where did I go? I just went down to, no, we're at the right spot. So when you're in here, you see, just like we had the semen falling outside her door, and then having this sexual act and defilement being perpetrated as a part of the ritual here, we see it happening in the building as well. The semen, the light entering, and so on. And so there's the semen falling here. There it is there. But it's not just semen. What is it? It's destruction. What is this falling from? There's nothing up there, right? It's just the building. That's the building starting to crumble. That's what it has to be. It's part of the rocks of the building just falling off. And here, same thing. In the church, when we see the very thing that is about to cause the conception of this new Aeon is also at the same time the destruction of the church. This has a cross on it. This is the church, as we know when we exit and we see the whole thing come falling down and crumbling down behind Ra-Hoor-Khuit, with him looking the other way, not even caring. That was the point of all of this, is to destroy it. But in the destruction of it, you bring about the next era, the next Aeon. Now, we keep going. In the midst of the scene, we saw who? Kali. Kali is here. She's dancing and pounding her feet hard on the ground and shaking it. It definitely looks like she's the cause, by her pounding on the ground, of these rocks falling. I don't think necessarily that she's literally on top of the church. I have a hard time understanding where exactly she is. I've tried to figure this out looking at the position of the dancers up here relative to surroundings compared to the church at the end. And it doesn't look like it's exactly on top, but I'm not positive, because remember earlier in the video when the dancer dives into the water committing suicide, immediately after we enter what? The underworld. That's why Ra-Hoor-Khuit is on this boat of Anubis. And one interpretation of the video is that when you're in the underworld, it's like everything is reversed. And so it's like there's two worlds that are symmetrical, one above the other, and underneath everything, when we're watching these scenes in the dark, we're watching the underworld, and maybe things are flipped over and they're distorted and all of that. So maybe she is dancing immediately on top of the church in the underworld, and so we're getting that sort of hidden perspective. I'm not sure, but certainly she's banging on this, and as that's happening, it's causing the rocks to fall. Perhaps she's just causing earthquakes and things, because as they exit the church, you'll see a vibration. Here, let's see if I can show that very quickly. Okay, so watch the vibration as we see the gargoyle or whatever, right here. There, see? It's like an earthquake. That breaks the water, he goes out, and shortly after that, you see the crumbling. I'm thinking that perhaps what's going on is we're seeing the dancing of Kali causing earthquakes, shaking, and so on, which is causing these rocks to fall into the church, and that's the semen, representing the semen falling. Okay, so what we have then is we have Kali bringing about this destruction, perhaps even by dancing on top of the church, or if not, in some position where it's like she's elevated high up and banging down on things and causing shaking and destruction in the church from wherever she's at. And one thing I'll just observe, we have a 9 or a 6 here. If it's a 9, we have a 9 with 2 legs, and 11 perhaps. If it's a 6, I'm not sure what we have. But it's there. It's a clear number. I don't know how to interpret it necessarily, but I wanted to point it out so that you know it's there. But we have her dancing, and we have her up here above this apple. This destruction that we're arriving at, this scene, the destruction of this church, the Catholic Church, I believe, is associated with being the whore of Babylon. Now, I don't believe it's associated with being with the whore of Babylon. I know it's associated with being the whore of Babylon. I believe it's representing the Catholic Church. But when we watch the apple let go from the magician Lilith's hand, right? She lets it go. That is her prop during her magic. And when she lets that go, it exits the magic circle here, and it's going out. It's like her spell has been completed and it's been released on the world. And now we're going to watch it unfold, which is why Obama's terrified. And that apple goes over and hits Obama's feet. And you can almost look down from this perspective at this big apple. And it's almost like looking from Obama's perspective down. What they're telling us, I think, moving from microcosm to macrocosm, this is a larger version showing us this was the spell. This is the destruction that's coming. It's going to be the destruction of the whore of Babylon. And the whore of Babylon, it appears to me, and iPetGo 2 has a twofold application. You've seen biblical interpreters say, it's the whore of Babylon is the Catholic Church, the hierarchy, the popes, these sorts of things, right? It's the Catholic Church. Whores and women are supposed to, in the Bible, represent the bride of Christ. It's the bride is a woman. Christ is the male. You have this representation of Christ being the husband and the bride being the church. Often Israel was represented as being the bride of God, the wife of God. And if they walked in wickedness, in covenant with God like that, they were whores. But you wouldn't talk about just the pagans as being whores. You wouldn't go out and say, the Egyptian nation, it's a whore against God. But they aren't even in covenant, special covenant with God. They can't be the whore. They can't be this unfaithful bride. And so the whore of Babylon is generally understood to be, historically has been understood frequently by important and good interpreters as an unfaithful, whorish church. And that application has a long history. And I think they're drawing on that in this video, certainly. The whore of Babylon, that woman, Madame Q, in the lighthouse, it's not just a lighthouse, it has a cross on top of it, it's a church. And then she's depicted as being, when we see the light go from her and then over into the building, that moves us into another church that she's representing. And so clearly, the whore of Babylon on one level is being represented as the church, but you also see interpreters, very modern interpreters, current interpreters say, no, the whore of Babylon can't be the church. The Catholic Church is basically obsolete. It's powerless anymore. It's become almost insignificant in world affairs and so on. It's not like it was 200 years ago. And to some extent that's true, but even in this video I think that's depicted. Her becoming old, very old, almost useless. Her time's up very clearly in the video. But these interpreters will sometimes say the whore of Babylon's the United States. I mean, look at the description, Revelation 18. It's clearly the U.S., the wealth, the power, and all of this. and it's going to be destroyed in an hour, right? In an instant, basically. And so they look at it that way. And this video, very interestingly, seems to find a way to not do the either or. They don't say, oh no, it's either the Catholic Church or the United States. It's like they put them both together, and I'll show that. It's really interesting. But what Obama is looking at is this, and this destruction that Shiva is dancing towards the end of I, Pet Goat 2, which will bring down the whore of Babylon, which is included the Catholic Church, certainly as part of this. It looks like churches are being destroyed left and right, with the whore being defiled. And also, I think it has an eye to, in some respect, the United States, and I'll show that. But what we're looking at is this dance, which is a dance that is left foot forward. Now, I mention that because Kali is a goddess of destruction which foot is forward makes a big difference in how people interpret her. So a little bit about Kali. Kali is a Hindu goddess, the goddess of time, creation, destruction, and power. She's the one who bestows liberation. She's often portrayed standing or dancing on her consort, Shiva, the Hindu god Shiva. Okay, and he lies prostrate beneath her. You see there. You see also how violently she is depicted. She's got a necklace of skulls around her. She's got a severed head in a hand, a sword. She's bloodied, right? Corpses around her, these sorts of things. She is the goddess of destruction. Even Hindus, for a very long time, were scared of her, to worship her, to be around. They didn't want to deal with her very much. And so they tried to sort of soften her image a little bit, and they made her look a little nicer by making her sort of a goddess of duality. Today, her image reflects her duality. Kali is depicted in the act of killing, but smiles engagingly, which makes it nicer. Her protruding red tongue signals both modesty and her thirst for blood. You see the duality? You get both now. But just because she's smiling and looks nice and all that doesn't mean that she's not bloodthirsty and killing. So when you see her in I, Pet Goat 2, here's her tongue, her bloodthirsty look, but she's had a smile on before that, right? You saw it when we see her, she enters the scene. She looks so kind of nice. Can she be destroying? Yeah, she's the goddess. Her image reflects duality. But the respectable right-handed path of Tantra is emphasized by her right foot forward stance. So when they're trying to present her respectably in the nice way, they put her right foot forward. But look, when she is in her terrible form, she is left foot forward. If her left foot is forward, terrible form. So we're going to see her wrath when we see her left foot forward. The depiction we have of her here, she is about as left foot forward as you can possibly be. They have her entirely stretched out, right foot as far back as possible, left foot as far forward as possible. She is in terrible form, and she is a destroyer in this image, which isn't a surprise given the context of I, Pet Goat 2. But if there was ever any doubt, and somebody came along and says, I'm going to interpret this video, and look, Shiva's not always bad. She's not mean. Sometimes she's real nice, and she does good stuff too. And you say, she's left foot forward, she's destroying. And it's settled. Okay, so we have an angry destroying, I'm sorry, if I said Shiva, I meant Kali. We have an angry destroying Kali here. And so her tongue's out, she's bloodthirsty, she is destroying. And she's on top of this building doing the destroying, which seems to represent some sort of building that's being damaged underneath, which could be the church, could be something higher than the church that includes the church, or just something that vibrates the church when she's doing that. What I think is interesting about that is she's usually depicted what? Dancing and stomping on her partner, often portrayed standing or dancing on her consort. And here she is, and we also know that she is generally, Shiva and Kali are always together. He is the changeless aspect of the supreme, and she, the apparently changing aspect of the same. Shiva is pure cosmic consciousness, and Kali is cosmic energy. No creation is possible without their union. Shiva cannot manifest without the power of Kali, and Kali cannot function without the consciousness of Shiva. And I'm not sure, not absolutely positive of this, but I think it's possible that in this scene where she's dancing, it says they're always together. And you say, well, where is Shiva? We have Kali. But we do know that she dances on and stomps on Shiva, her partner. And if we're looking at this path, at this video, as a representation of the beast defiling and, as it were, trouncing on and dancing on and destroying the whore, and the whore being whore representing the church or something like that, it's almost as though what we're witnessing is not just her dancing and stomping on this and causing these rocks to fall. It's like she's dancing and destroying her partner. And so if this is a representation of what the beast is doing to the whore, it actually captures it pretty well if you were to think of it metaphorically as Kali stomping on Shiva. They've been partners for a very long time, the beast and the whore, and now the beast is about to destroy her. Now, biblically, that actually is what happens to the Catholic Church, right? Or the whore of Babylon in Revelation 17. How is the whore destroyed in the Bible? The 10 horns of the beast, which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked. There she is, desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Interestingly, the worshippers of Kali used to eat the flesh of people because they were violent people, criminal type, that found her very destructive nature appealing. And then it continues, for God hath put it in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast until the words of God shall be fulfilled. In other words, God is going to make the beast turn on the whore and destroy her, making her desolate and naked, and then eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Turns out they regret that later. They're like, what have we done? And they weep over her and that. But clearly it says, and the woman which thou sawest, this whore, is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. That's present tense. When John wrote that, that was Rome. And just a few verses up in the chapter, the woman sits on the 7 mountains, the city of the 7 mountains, the city of hills, 7 hills, which is Rome. Okay, so the Roman Catholic Church is a perfect fit for this, and is also represented in IPEC Go-To with the crosses and the whore. And if you look closely, when this video was released in 2012, the Pope was Ratzinger. And I remember the first time we watched this video, those of us who were watching right after that, I remember when I watched it, that I saw this, before I knew it was even a woman in there, represented as woman, I saw the eyes and the face. I said, they got Ratzinger in here, just like they had Bush in there, and just like they had Obama in there. It was like, oh, that's clearly Ratzinger. That's Pope Benedict. And it was a surprise, a shocking surprise, to go in and see this naked old woman and him being represented like an old whore. And it was pretty evident what they had in mind here. But you see, here's Ratzinger being represented as the whore of Babylon. And in fact, after this happened, he was driven out of the papacy and replaced by the Jesuit Francis, and which is a really interesting development. Obviously, if you're familiar with the history, and you probably followed the news at the time, popes retiring doesn't happen, hasn't happened for centuries until this one. And so this is a very unusual situation where this pope, looked like a prisoner, is cast out of that position and replaced with somebody else, which is very interesting. Almost like he's in a prison now. So you may even be able to make a case for Pope Francis sort of being the beast's right-hand man to overtake the Catholic Church and bring it down finally. Most Catholics would even believe that he's been doing that pretty effectively with his theology and a lot of the changes he's made. And with Ratzinger thrown out, we may look at this as sort of Ratzinger being in prison now, and this being fulfilled in part in Ratzinger's removal, Francis replacing him, and whatever else is still coming to the Catholic Church. Now, I've said a few times that it's not just in this video, the whore of Babylon being the Catholic Church. I think that's the primary application. The crosses and the church everywhere around sort of says that's the Pope, that's the Catholic Church being destroyed. But when we look at the final scene, we see that they have more in mind than just that. So if you look here, we have Shiva doing her dancing and destruction, and she brings down the Catholic Church finally with her dance of destruction. That final earthquake brought it down. But what's interesting is that was a yoni that he came out. That was a vagina. The water broke. He passed out as a birthing. But what is gone now is this old Catholic Church that's small. At one time, that was a great and glorious building, and now it's a small thing compared to, if we want to think of the U.S. as sort of the new Babylon, right? Because we replace one yoni with another huge one, with enormous modern cities, a representation of the power and wealth of the West, it looks like, in particular. But look closely, and this yoni looks like an A to me. And here you have a U, S, A. And what may be being depicted here, if you see this is a tsunami coming over the top of an enormous city in a wealthy place, what may be indicated here is the big water event that ends up being the destruction of the U.S., or if it's not literally a water event, but just being represented as one, whatever that great event is that destroys the U.S. finally, it looks like they may have that in mind. Now, if you're just looking at this as sort of a physical geological sort of thing, you could say big earthquake over there in Italy or off the coast of Italy or something like that, wipes out Rome, sends tsunami over to the East Coast. I mean, I guess that's a possibility. You got the Canary Islands over there, and geologists say there's a very small chance that something like that could happen, but it's happened once before, 75,000 years ago or something. They have these numbers a long time ago. I don't know how long ago it was or if it happened actually, but they say there's evidence that that sort of thing has happened. But here we could see something like that, or just that we have a sort of a dual application of the Whore of Babylon. We have the Catholic Church being destroyed. That's the small example of it. The old one that's all worn out, but is the Whore of Babylon, I think, biblically. But yet we have an application to whatever this is as the Whore of Babylon as well, which looks like the USA. And we know throughout this video, the USA is clearly depicted as being a primary target right outside the classroom with the flag being torn in half. And so that's why I mentioned that. I think they have both in mind. I think they have the Whore of Babylon in mind as the Catholic Church and the USA. And they're going to try to eliminate both in this attack, if you want to call it that, that's necessary in order to bring in the Aeon of Horus. If you want to bring in the Aeon of Horus, you've got to get rid of the Catholic Church, the Christian Church, the Christians, and the U.S. And notice inside that Catholic Church, I should add one more thing. Inside the Catholic Church, we saw in the video at the beginning, the fish jumping into the boat of Anubis. We've talked about that earlier in the series as the Christians jumping in, and I forgot like the name of that species, like the sheephead or something fish, but it has something like sheep in it, which again shows that this is the Christians sort of hopping in. And what's interesting is the rocks falling are the acts of destruction that these elites are trying to perform that are causing fear in the people. And it's the very act of those enemies of Christianity that make the Christians afraid and go to the wrong person for safety, even unto their death. So I suspect the people who are most likely to fall for this are the people who don't understand what's going on. The Christians that are most likely to be killed are, sadly, the ones who are the least informed about this, or have just been closed-minded or too preoccupied with other things to take this sort of thing seriously. And I don't blame them or think anybody should hold anything against them for that. I think we should be ready to help them as much as we can. That said, right as I wrap up, there are two last things I should mention. One, in relation to the two yonis or two vaginas here, there's two birthings, remember, as well. We also had the birthing of Harpocrates and Ra-Hoor-Kut, because we have a composite deity in Heru-ra-ha. So there's two aspects of Horus, and perhaps that's also why we have two birthings, right? You need two vaginas to have two births, unless I guess you could say twins out of one. But in this case, you have the two. And there may even be a little bit of time difference between the two events. The destruction of the U.S. is represented in iPet Goat 2 earlier in the video, it seems. And the events that seem to be pointing to the destruction of the Roman Catholic Church perhaps are later. But I'm not sure that's actually a correct interpretation. It could be almost simultaneous. as well. And lastly, at the beginning I mentioned that the apple goes out, bumps his feet, opens up like a lotus. So the apple goes out from the magician, Lilith, bumps Obama's foot. You see the lotus flower open, and then you have Obama looking down, frightened at it, and that's what terrifies him, this whole sequence. And then we have the big apple here, and I mentioned at the end we get the lotus flowers. Well, it's with the destruction of the Whore of Babylon that we get the birthing, it looks like, afterwards, of Heru-ra-ha or Horus, and we get the Aeon of Horus and the lotus flowers opening up. And so these seem to be the events that Obama's terrified of, the event sequence that leads up to the complete destruction of the Whore of Babylon, both the USA and the Roman Catholic Church. And so that seems to be primary targets on the way to the Aeon of Horus. All right, so that's what I think is right, and I'm sure there are ways to improve it and a lot more details to give, and maybe some corrections people will be able to make and suggest in the comments. So let me know what you think. Like, subscribe, share, all that. Take care.